Columbia University. He's currently the president of
This morning was a glorious morning, I think, for all of us. I think it was a unique moment in the story of the Earth, or maybe the universe story. I think this gathering has something close to historical significance. For in my own acquaintance with the way in which humans are thinking their way through the present situation, I am not aware of any other context in which precisely what is taking place here is being realized. I think the work of Brian is a very special work, and this reorientation toward the universe is something that has long been needed. And I think that this is the verification of what I have been saying about science being the yoga of the West. The scientific effort to understand the universe may well be the most sustained effort ever made by humans at that level of intensity. Certainly it is the most sustained level of meditation on the universe that has been carried out through empirical means. This is a new type of meditation. This is a new yogic type procedure. It is a collective thing. It is a generational thing handed on from one to the other. It is a thing that has required a certain amount of asceticism on the part of the scientists, a certain extreme dedication. It has required the abandonment of the consolations of religion or the world of the spiritual. It has required a setting aside of the great mythic world, of the great visionary world. All of these we recognize are periods when the human mind entered into certain self-imposed constraints, and we are to some extent irritated by it. But on the other hand, it's through the intensity of this process that we've come to the type of a vision that we have at the present time. We would never have come to it any other way. There is perhaps a certain amount of inevitability, such as Brian suggested, about many of the things that have happened when he outlines the constants of the universe and shows us that things as they are come into being by a deep, mysterious harmonization of laws that are abiding constraints or abiding parameters within which the universe functions. And of course, one of the most powerful of these is the first thing that Brian mentioned as regards that moment of emergence of the universe and the rate of emergence. If it had been 100 billion, 100 billionth of a fraction faster or 100 billionth of a fraction slower, the universe would either have exploded or collapsed. And everything since then lives on that margin between explosion and collapse. That's why the human has to learn its proper curve. Everything has to learn its proper curve. The curvature of space has to be closed enough that it will contain and articulate entities, identifiable designs, and sustainable patterns. At the same time, it has to be open enough to be continually creative in bringing forth new realities. And so with life, so with personal life, so with every form of life. It has to be sufficiently, establish its identity, but still have that margin of creativity and difference, so that things are never quite the same. And so with life as we have it, we have to find the curve of the modern world, how we can establish ourselves in sufficiently constant pattern of relationships that are continually deepening and developing as regards the future of the planet, because nothing is static. And time from moment to moment does not repeat itself any more than the leaves of a tree ever repeat themselves in their basic pattern, or any snowflake is similar to another, or just as no atom is the same as another atom. They're all very, very different. The great thing that was done by the scientific process was to penetrate matter and to undertake an experiment that evidently had to be carried out by intelligence at a great cost, at a great human cost, at great human disruption, at great human pain, and also with the violation, as has come about, of a great deal of the life forces of the planet on which we live. And so it is at a great sacrificial process, and the universe has a sacrificial dimension at every moment, because at every moment things are being sacrificed to bring forth something the next moment. And our own age, as it must be considered to have a deep sacrificial aspect. But the moment has come, though, and that's our moment, when this sense of the empirical entry into the world of matter has finally done its work. That is, into matter unrelated to the psychic, spiritual order of things. And now, the rediscovery of the spiritual, I compare this sometimes to the meeting of Dante with Beatrice at the end of the Purgatorio. Dante, who represents a total human community, and his great journey through the desolation of the Inferno, through the difficulties of the Purgatorio, and at the end he meets Beatrice as the total human community, alienated from the divine, is once again meeting the divine. It's the incarnational moment. Beatrice descends, and it's one of the few moments, I think, where a woman assumes the incarnational mission and also the role of the Eucharist, because the carriage into which she descends was the Corpus Christi carriage, or the chariot, where the host would be carried. It was an invention of that century, the 13th century, the Corpus Christi festival, and the processions that ever since, certainly throughout the European world, is a civic event as well as an ecclesiastical event. And he uses this event, he puts together the incarnation, the ideas of celestial transformation, the redemption issue, and the Eucharistic presence all together, and the feminine issue. and Dante is there, and then the great mystery is this is the greatest moment of the part of the poem poetically is probably this description. It covers 3 cantos, I believe, or at least 2 cantos at the end of the Purgatorio. I think we're in something of a moment like that. We are meeting the world, the enchantment of the world. We're meeting the world in its high splendor at a new moment after being lost for some centuries. And they were centuries that those of us that have gone through this particular century are blessed with the fact that we come at the end of that period of alienation, and that once again we can be present to the universe in this very special way, and that we have done this through under the guidance of the earth itself, because while we think that we are learning about the earth, and we very seldom think that the earth is teaching us, and the scientists, and the real scientists, of course, do develop that sensitivity, like Barbara McClintock, that sensitivity, that awareness, that intimacy with the world, that capacity for presence, that capacity for exaltation, for communion, that is so powerful, that is expressed physically by the gravitational presence that runs throughout the universe, that holds everything together in one great embrace. And so that everything participates in the great embrace of the universe that begins with the gravitational process and then is expressed in many other ways through life and consciousness, until there's a kind of a very special way in which humans are capable of embracing each other, and also capable of embracing the universe with a certain affection. As I mentioned before, it's reconstituting the affective life of the human as well as the intellectual life of the human. If I went to perhaps I should also mention the religious life of the human, because this is a religious moment that I also might compare to the moment when the great religions were founded. The great religions came into being in their basic orientations almost at the same time throughout the world. There are some great coordinations that have taken place in the religious life of the human. There was a great period at the beginning or the middle of the first millennium BC, around year 500. It's a period that would go, say, from 800 to 300 years before Christ, when the great religious founders, the great cultural personalities inhabited the world, and without being in immediate contact with each other, he articulated some very profound things that had a certain commonality to them, and which have set up the basic volume, I say, of what it is to be human, and how humans relate themselves with the rest of the world, and how they guide the course of human destiny, and how humans associate with each other. These great spiritual movements, spiritual religious movements, will always be central to the human endeavor. There's no way of supplanting them, or because they do things that will never again be able to be accomplished, and without these we cannot go forward. But they themselves cannot take us the next step purely by their own means. And that I suggest, is the work of this great spiritual task of the new story of the universe that we now have. I consider this a revelatory experience, that it has a revelatory aspect, that it puts us into a new context where hopefully we will have the energies to readjust the human in that comprehensive way that is needed at the present time. I'm sure you've heard me say my little piece. I put it in 3 sentences, and it's a little summation I give sometimes. I start off sometimes in talking about, I say I have 3 sentences to identify our present situation. The first is the 20th century, the glory of the human has become the desolation of the earth. Second sentence, the desolation of the earth is becoming the destiny of the human. Third sentence, all human institutions, professions, programs, and activities must be judged primarily by the extent to which they obstruct, ignore, or foster a mutually enhancing human-earth relationship. It's that simple. Everything, no matter if you're talking education, law, medicine, or whatever, the basic thing is the mutually enhancing human-earth relationship. History is being made now not within nations or between nations, but between humans and the earth. The adjustment of the medical profession is, this is the direction it must go. Law, which is sometimes suggested as next to religion, perhaps the most retarded of the professions, has to undergo an enormous adjustment. The tradition of law that we have, the common law tradition, is very noble in its defense of the human, but it has miserably little to say about the rights of the natural world. Miserably little. And it has never been developed in that direction. And it must be developed in that direction in the terms of the commons and the protection of the commons, the air, the water, the soil. These are the global commons, and we must have legal processes whereby these have their rights, where rivers and mountains and trees are capable of being defended at law in their own person, so that this recognition of rights of the natural world, it's been articulated by United Nations. United Nations in the Global Charter for Nature articulated the fact that every being, every living creature has the rights to its habitat, but humans must establish moral principles of recognition, and that we have no rights to intrude on the necessary habitats of living creatures. So, but again, going back to this issue of mutually enhancing human-earth relationships, the question is, again, the question of the human. The human is a problem, a real problem of the earth. It's a real issue to ourselves, not simply to ourselves, but to every other being. Laura and I and Barbara just had our meeting and our discussion of, as I suggested, that we considered ourselves the parliament of creatures, and we had a long discussion about what to do with the humans. But we had a few suggestions to make. But there is, again, though, a way of understanding of what we have done in terms of the 3 basic laws of the universe. Brian has given us the physical laws, and they might be summarized in terms of the three basic controlling directions of the universe is differentiation, subjectivity, and communion. The universe is primarily differentiation. It is by definition, it is a differentiating process. Now, and it is a differentiating process that's not homogeneous much, and just differentiated spatially, but it's articulated entities qualitatively different, each from the other, and then everything is bound together. And so my suggestion as regards how to view this moment again is this. When humans come into being, their first obligation is to articulate their difference. So we must articulate our difference from the rest of things. We must articulate the inner values of the human. Now, and then we must articulate our presence to and our participation with the larger community of life. I would suggest that at this time the human has fulfilled in a very special way the first two, and that this is what we have been doing. We've been trying to articulate our difference. That's why we entered into this very special sense of the human as a spiritual being. We have certain human qualities, the humanities over against the natural sciences and so forth. But we also had to give ourselves this deeper articulation of the inner qualities of ourselves, and to assert to some extent this element of control, because the planet evidently is giving it control over to the human. Now, the human is undoubtedly a very special being, and a new age of the universe, a very new age, began when humans came into existence. Now, there is the question about over-exalting the human, but there has to be the recognition that with the humans, something happened that didn't happen anywhere else. And it's not that the humans are the great value. Everything constitutes the value. But nowhere else is the universe or the planet Earth giving over the direction of itself to any other species. And it seems that whereas until now the universe has directed the human, has directed itself to producing the human, now it is directing the universe through the human. And it will not do certain things except through the human. Of course, there are a multitude of things that need to be clarified, and I would like to say from the beginning, certainly as regards language, that we are working with an inadequate language, and that's part of our task, is to create a new language. It frequently, almost always, comes back to the question of creating a new language, because when we are creating a new form of cultural identity and cultural expression, we do need to find the language for it. Now, when I suggest that we need to reinvent the human at the species level, that's what this language is driving us, the question of language is driving us back to. Because we do not have in any of the cultures of the world an adequate language to deal with the things that we're dealing with. And whether it's in the social questions, or law, or education, or religion, or ethics, or whatever, we are back at the beginning, so to speak. We're ground zero. And but not exactly. We're at the second moment of what I call the naivete. We're at the post-critical moment of naivete. We're very close to the indigenous peoples of the world. We're very close to the earliest beginnings of the human in so many ways, much closer there than we are to some of the intervening cultures that we now are seeing in their dark side as well as in their bright side. So how to avail ourselves of the brightness of these cultural traditions while avoiding their darkness is not easy. Sometimes we develop a certain antagonism, even a certain bitterness and a language of rejection. And I suppose it's necessary, just as it's necessary for children at times in their establishing their independence, to establish a certain antagonistic relationship with parents in order to achieve their identity. And that is one of the issues that we face as regards our past, as regards our language, as regards our ideas of the spiritual, of religion, of justice. All of these questions have both a wonderful heritage as well as just almost awesome defects. Sometimes I talk about our moment in history as a poignant moment. It's a poignant moment of just such devastation, such terrifying devastation, and such that we hardly permit ourselves to get into it lest it have the effects of the Medusa. As you know the story of Medusa, nobody could deal with Medusa because anyone that saw Medusa would be turned into stone. And so the only way that the Medusa could be eventually dealt with, the destructive force, was by approaching it backward through the image on the shield. And so that a person had to deal with something that they couldn't even confront.